Hello, everybody. I'm Ilene Serlin, and today we're going to talk about the China-US Whole Person Dance Psychotherapy Training Program. It's been my real honor to work at the Community Institute for Psychotherapy since 2010. This is an existential humanistic training. It was responsible for bringing Irv Yalom's training model to Beijing. And at a conference in existential psychology in 2010 in Nanjing, I was asked to do a workshop in Beijing. It grew into more workshops and ultimately a training program where we've been training since 2010, counselors mostly, in how to bring in dance movement, embodiment techniques into their counseling work. So we have different applications. Some were already working as nurses, as counselors, in hospitals with children, and so incorporated these techniques. It's mostly embodiment training. The most important thing was that it's really from an existential humanistic perspective. This seminar is an attempt to articulate that perspective, bringing in, we were so looking forward to being in Montreal with you, 3 of my colleagues from China, trainees. You'll see coming up, and they'll do their presentations. And in a minute, I'm going to share the screen and give you a proper welcome and introduce the panelists. Here is the screen share. So this is the China-US Whole Person Dance Psychotherapy Training is what we call it, on October 16th. It's from the China Institute of Psychology. There are 4 of us on this panel, me, who's been a teacher and supervisor since 2010. And I'll be talking about our use of DMT to work on the hotline during COVID in China with Grace Zhou, who's been our interpreter since 2013, and now using movement herself in her work, in this case, in a group, a support group that she's been doing during COVID with the pastoral clergy in Beijing. Chloe Liu is a student at the China Institute of Psychology, a counselor, and who's brought dance movement therapy into her work in a family approach. Together, we're going to articulate an article that just came out on our work, written together about an existential humanistic approach to dance movement therapy. And the 4th panelist is Julia Huang, who's going to talk about, from the south of China, she's going to talk about using dance movement therapy in her work in group psychotherapy as a group counselor dealing with anger. The learning objectives of this seminar are to understand what is an existential humanistic approach to group psychotherapy, to describe how movement can be integrated into an existential humanistic ongoing group psychotherapy, and then 3, to learn about challenges and opportunities for cross-cultural exchanges. Thank you, and now the video will start. In a moment, you're going to see a videotape that was made February 15th. It was when the virus had just started. It hadn't really hit the United States as much as I was, had a phone call with China that evening and was so moved by the stories that I developed the short videotape about what can be done really in a short time to help people who are housebound COVID. And then talking with Grace Zhou about what we could do. We had all kinds of ideas because people were using, and the counselors were using Zoom for trauma interventions for people with COVID. And we thought, what can we do? We rather spontaneously came up with a story, which we're going to do a very quick overview of that story. Which we made into a kind of a video clip that people can see on their phones, and it's being used with training with counselors. So it started out like this. we both were, Grace, we both were doing with the heart dance. Grace, and I said, greetings to you from San Francisco. And Grace said,
greetings to you from China, from Beijing.
We said, I send my heart, my good wishes to you.
I send my best wishes to you from China.
Mm-hmm. And then together we were sending energy to see if through Zoom we could actually send good energy. And that turned into together, and it began to stretch with this energy until we were stretching up, stretching up, stretching up, stretching up. And as we did that, we began to reach up, and we began to reach for seeds of hope, of hope, of hope. As we began to reach up, we took the seeds and we planted them in the earth. And we began to reach down and plant them in the earth. Plant them. And plant them. And then we began to water the seeds. And water the seeds. And dig and plant and water. And we began to push the seeds down into the earth. And a tree began to grow from our hope. A tree began to grow and grow. But then a storm came and illness, and some of the branches were broken. And some of us said, it's too much, I give up. But some said, I have life. No, I give up. No, I want to live. No, I give up. I will live. I choose to live. And we choose to live. But we understood that what we needed to do is take those broken branches and make art. And so we found ways to use our scars and our scarves to bring beauty and to make art. And we come back to Grace.
Yes.
Tell the story about, we noticed it was springtime. And the leaves around us are green. And what's happening in the Yangtze River?
春江水暖鸭先知. The ducks in Yangtze River know the spring first, earlier than human beings, but we know the spring has come.
And the ducks, although we are the swans, are swimming in the river.
Yes, the swans and ducks are swimming in the river, in the Yangtze River. Yes.
The sun is here. Our tree is growing.
Yes. 杨柳依依.
And we want to give you this hope and plant seeds of hope for all of you. From our heart to your hearts,
到您的心。
to may your bodies be strong and healthy and hope. Three. So we would like to end this dance from San Francisco to Beijing. We send you seeds of hope. Grace?
我们给你们带来希望的种子。中国北京，从中国北京带来希望的种子。Yes.
Chloe? All right, Julia. Cissé?
This is from Grace. Grace Zhou from Beijing, China. Recording or are we ending this?
No, let's end. I wanted Chloe to speak, but she didn't understand. So there was too much silence. So let's end. Yeah. It was
okay.
Good. Just with this was enough.
Okay.
Now, Grace, what happens if you freeze? You're next, your video and your talk.
I will stop then. Just a second. I'll move to the other end. I'll use my laptop. Just a second. Can we have someone, as I'm adjusting, can we have maybe Chloe speak first, or do you still want me to speak first?
Do it in order. Go ahead. Let's keep strict to the script we have. No changes. Yeah.
Okay, let me just can I share my screen then?
I think so. I hope so. Let's try. We're counting on it.
Let me just because I need to turn off my yes. Just a second.
Okay.
Just a second.
Ilene, you are recording now.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Grace Zhou from Beijing, China. I'd like to share with you one case when we use DMT with pastoral care professionals in the breakout of coronavirus. I had 10 pastoral care workers from different parts of China who joined me in internet, and we see each other once every Friday each week. In the first week, we see each other 5 days in a row, 1 hour each day, because I have to do intervention with them. So first part is intervention, crisis intervention for 2 weeks. And the second phase would be 1 week, 2 hour each week meeting for DMT, self-discovery, and training as well. So let me start with the crisis intervention part. We did it for 10 days, and we shared, first of all, ideas in how to help people stay calm in crisis intervention. We used grounding skills mostly, and also shaking, because people get very stiff, and we used polarizing skills. You can be very freeze, and you can be very big, you can be very small and big. So basically 3 skills, and I carry them through, and they practice and they share, and also they help their churchgoers and also their family members as well. And they found it very effective. So that's the first phase. Yeah. And also we see each other just to make sure that we are alive, because that was in the first lockdown of Wuhan, and people were not sure of the future. And, you know, it was rumor goes everywhere. And so people were afraid that they may die in any minute. You never know if you're affected or not. So in that moment, we're facing death with DMT in human existential approach, with shaking, with polarizing, with grounding skills each day. And also with, we start with some praise songs that they are familiar with, because they get stiff. And in the second phase, that it's a weekly meeting. We had post-interview, we had pre-interview, and also all the participants did DASS, D-A-S-S, which is an Australian international test on depression, anxiety, and stress. So they have to fill out 21 questions, and we see their stress level. And also we had expectations mapped out from all the participants in the pre-interview. And then we started the journey of self-discovery. Since they are all pastors, and they... Hi everyone, I'm Grace Zhou from Beijing, China, a DMT and a counselor, and also a coach, career coach as well. In the breakout of coronavirus, and after the breakdown of a lockdown of Wuhan, we had a team of 10 pastoral care workers joining DMT online work. We had, in the first 10 days, intervention, crisis intervention with DMT, basically with shaking, movement, with polarizing, small, big, polarizing movement, and grounding skills, so that people can build a safe place, and also building some boundary as well. So after 10 days, we meet each other, and the second phase is a 10 to 15 week self-discovery journey. We had structured it in such a way that would help them to build from their people, from their thinking brain. And so we structured it into reading and also DMT at the same time. So DMT will focus on self-discovery, on their relationship with themselves, with the world, with their family, with their community. And the reading is chosen Lolo May's work on man's search for meaning. So they could, first of all, discuss how they would discover how their body would feel. And then they would turn to philosophical views or theoretical assumptions of how human beings would face anxiety, loneliness, and death. So they at least come from some part that they are familiar with, that theory part, and then they will move to, they can experience DMT. So we had the reading first in the first 2 weeks, and then DMT. But starting from the third week, we start with DMT first, self-discovery first, and then come to reading. And they got so excited later on, they don't want to do reading anymore. They only want to do DMT. And after 10 weeks, we do DASS again, which is a pre-test and post-test on their level of anxiety, stress, and depression. And also we had an interview with them. I'd like you to hear what they learned from these sessions. Now, let's watch the videos.
Thank you. In the next presentation that I'm doing with Chloe Liu, who was a student at the China Institute of Psychotherapy, who came with a strong background in philosophy and was especially interested in kind of articulating some of the philosophical underpinnings. Together, we wrote an article that we are both going to be reading from because we're not presenting in person. We'll make it fairly brief. And it came out in the Creative Arts and Education Journal. It's online, and please email me or any one of us if you'd like a copy. So it starts out with what is an existential humanistic approach to movement. Although an existential humanistic approach to movement hasn't received much attention from dance and movement therapists, as in the Levy book, it was one of the first existential humanistic to have an experiential embodied approach to psychotherapy. We have Thomas Hanna and Charlotte Selver and Charles Brooks. They were at Esalen, and they were among the first in the 60s and 70s to bring the body into psychotherapy, very much from a here and now existential perspective. Some faced death and came through with resilience and the renewed will to live. That's Viktor Frankl. In the United States, we have Carl Rogers, Rollo May, Abraham Maslow, the farther reaches of human nature. So just a few more lines about what is existential humanistic psychology and how does it relate to Chinese culture. I'll say a few words and then Chloe will join me on that. Existential philosophies do have quite a few striking similarities with some aspects of Chinese poetry, literature, and philosophies. Both existential philosophies and Chinese culture concern themselves with the fundamental themes of life, suffering and finding a way out of suffering. From an existential point of view, we need to confront death or our own mortality in order to live fully. The emphasis from an existential approach is to be fully human, be present fully in each moment, with a balance of body, emotion, energy, and spirit. Then we can make wise choices, freedom and responsibility have meaning, and from that we can create a meaningful life. From a Chinese perspective, all three major Chinese philosophies, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, contain these strong existential themes. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Chloe, to talk about her experience in class that exemplifies an existential humanistic approach to dance therapy.
Thank you. Eileen asked me, do you think existentialism is related to Chinese philosophy? If so, how? I answered, in traditional Chinese philosophy, the ultimate goal of life or ultimate concern is the questions of settle down and get on with one's pursuit. Everyone has her or his own understanding and cognition of life and the world, so that everything in life and world has different meanings and values for different people, or the awareness and understanding of the life and world to a certain extent makes the different meanings of life and world to different people, which constitutes a certain state of themselves. It's very similar to the Sartre's existentialism, which is the living and central factor of life. As a EH psychotherapist, when I delivered psychological service to clients, I found that existential and humanistic psychology, which I have been practiced for years, is operationally effective and compatible with clients have life and death-related issues. The four ultimate restrictions of human existence, death, freedom without root, isolation, and meaninglessness, have doomed life with suffering and inner conflict. Why do we still struggle to live? If we think it is necessary, it is not necessary to live. What kind of experience is this? These answers can only be obtained through in-depth personal introspection. Yalom said this One morning, I asked Ilene how to experience dance as movement. What kind of experience of dance? How terrible is it? What is after dance and what will I do? I'm very curious. I was eager to get the answer from Movement and Ilene, but the teacher did not give me a clear verbal answer. I do not remember how Ilene did and what the group did in the structure. I was totally immersed in the inner experience. At that time, one of my hands was held by another hand. I followed the lead of that hand and danced. This hand was not someone's hand. It was an energy that led me to follow. The energy of this group was transmitted to me through this hand. All of a sudden, my consciousness turned to my empty hand. I was a little flustered. I felt that this hand should also grasp the hand of another person. It did not matter who that person was, but it just made me feel that I was integrated with everyone. My inner needs were expressed through the flustered search of this hand. And this time, a hand was handed to me in time. The timing was just right, and the intensity was proper. And the moment when I needed it, I held a hand. I expressed that it was. Thank you, I'm Chloe. One morning, I asked Ilene how to experience dance in movement. What kind of experience is dance? How terrible is it? What is it after dance, and what will I do? I'm very curious. I'm eager to get the answer from Movement and Ilene, but the teacher did not give me the verbal answer. I do not remember how Ilene did and what the group did the structure. I was totally immersed in the inner experiences. At that time, one of my hands was held by another hand. I followed the lead of that hand and danced. This hand was not someone's hand. It was the energy that led me to follow. The energy of the group was transmitted to me through this hand. All of a sudden, my consciousness turned to my empty hand. I was a little flustered. I felt that this hand should also grasp the hand of another person. It did not matter who that person was, but it just made me feel that I was integrated with everyone. My inner needs were expressed through the flustered search of this hand. And this time, a hand was handed to me in time. The timing was just right, and the intensity was proper. At the moment when I needed it, I held a hand. I experienced that it was like when I was about to lose power. I was connected to the power supply, and I was able to living again. I opened my eyes and found it was Ilene. I felt a gentle holding and a deep stare. I was just like a little baby when hungry. I was held by one hand to the breast and drink sweet milk. I closed my eyes and continued to immerse myself in the nourished life. I started to grow again from the stagnant state. I had many desires, aspirations, and hopes for the future. However, I have also been feeling that I was thrown into an empty space, just like an astronaut shuttling through space in a spaceship. Suddenly, I was thrown out of the cabin with a separation from mankind. All future possibilities came to an abrupt end. The soul was still there, but it floated alone in endless space and time again. I know I have experienced dance, and I have also experienced my nostalgia for life. After experience all this, I discovered that the hand I was holding had been released. In dance therapy, the miraculous experience of dance made me realize that I choose to live. Because I long for the diverse possibility of the future, I was lucky to meet dance by chance, and I experienced that life is like possible possibility of the future, and dance is like possible impossibility of future. I know that only when we are alive can it be possible to realize infinite possibilities even in our limited life. Thank you.
各位亲爱的老师还有同道我很荣幸在这里能够去分享我在中国做本土实践的一个舞动的案例。那么今天呢，我将会请我的翻译来去帮我去代为去转读我的这一份案例的一个报告。谢谢。
Dear teachers and colleagues, I am very honored to participate in such an international conference as a student of Professor Ilene Serlin. In my dancing training, Irene has always given me a lot of guidance, support, and caring. And his positivity, enthusiasm, love for dance therapy, and her spirit of exploring humanism have always had a great impact on me. I am very grateful to her. Today, I will present a case of emergency intervention in my group. It is a case that still makes me feel excited and shocked until now. I call this case Jack. That was the second day of the dancing group, and we were dividing groups to practice on the topic boundary. While everyone was pairing up, Lucy, a lady in my group, said that she did not want to be paired up with Jack. I asked if there were other groups willing to switch partner. Jack suddenly became very angry when I was talking and said, "Why did she refuse me? I shall insist on pairing up with her. I will quit if she is not with me." Lucy said she insists to not pair up with Jack. There we went into a deadlock. I obviously felt the tension within the whole group. I'm trying to intervene. At this time, one of the members said something like, "If you want to quit, just quit then." The group here became even worse, and everything came too suddenly, which was of course unexpected. I was trying to get closer to that man. Suddenly, he shouted angrily with a louder voice, "Who said so? Who said this?" He was very angry indeed, and when speaking, pointing to the crowd with fingers. The atmosphere became frozen. The pointing of that finger was very oppressive, and when he spoke, his eyes were wide open and his face flushed. I could feel the anger in his heart is surging, and it felt like it was going to turn our whole class down. The others were silent at the moment, and he shouted again. This time, I was already by his side. I tried to make him calm down and ask him to breathe, but I failed. Other class members stood frozen. I realized a very big challenge is right in front of me, and I must face it. So I told everybody, "I'm sorry, something very unexpected happened to our group, and we have to face it. Let's take a break. And everybody please stay here. I will arrange an individual intervention with Jack, but I am also with all of you. Does that sound okay?" Everyone said yes. I was a little worried whether he would have any fierce movements which will hurt others. So I waited until everyone distanced themselves from us. Then I started the following work. I approached him again and told him, "You look angry now. Can you express your anger with a movement?" Fortunately, he didn't lose faith in me. He followed my suggestion and went into mood quickly. His two hands were like pistols, with strength at the same time, squatting on his knee and stepping heavily on the ground with his feet. I immediately mirrored him and said, "Can you do it again?" He repeated one more time. I mirrored it again and then asked him, "Can you do it a few more times?" He did it again. I invited him to be more vigorous. He did it a few more times and slowly he stopped in an upright manner, leaning sideways with other finger at the partner who just rejected him. 5 seconds later, I gently pulled his arm over. So now the direction of the finger was pointing to me. I looked into his eyes, and gradually I reached out a hand and faced him with an open arm. We looked at each other in this position. At that moment, I felt calm inside. I believe this is what we have to do now. I am willing to face all this. After just 1 minute, his hands began to shake, and gradually his fingers and movements changed, from a gun shape to a flat palm shape. I gently touched the palm of his hand and saw his tears begin to fill his eyes. After another minute, he suddenly began to cry out loud with the whole body shaking. At that moment, I felt a huge sadness. The tall man standing in front of me suddenly became a grieved child all of a sudden. I gently said to him, "I am here, I am here. Keep breathing." After he cried for a few minutes, I asked him to open his eyes and said, "What do you want to do now?" He slowly moved his hand to his stomach, and my hand followed his, covering his hand. He continued to cry for a few minutes, and the whole person slowly began to soften. I asked him to move his body a bit. He slowly moved his hand from his stomach. And then I asked him if he wanted to walk around the room. He said yes. So I walked around the room with him, following his steps, and kept paying attention to breathing, slowly expanding or controlling my movements in a very gentle way. In this way, the intervention successfully resolved the current crisis. When he felt that his mood was slowly calming down, I told him that now I need to invite everybody back to sit around and talk. I asked him, "Would you like to join us?" He said he could listen close by, but he didn't want to talk. I said, "That's fine." When everyone was sitting around, I asked him, "Are you guys all right?" I looked at Lucy, who had previously refused to partner with Jack, and paid special attention when asking, "Are you okay? Would you like to talk to us?" This group member expressed some of her own feelings during the process. She said she was also very angry, but not so scared, because she has been insisting on her position, which gave her the feeling of being powerful. Other group members also expressed their feelings gradually. Everyone was shocked about how deep the movement intervention can go once again with this actual example. Then we used motion to express and deepen these emotions. The group is like a ship sailing in the ocean. After the storm gradually subsided, and the ship continued to sail forward. At the level of movement intervention, the man's initial movement presented the characteristic of his driving force: strong, direct, fast, and restrained. From the perspective of Laban movement analysis, the keen sphere is large. It presents three spatial dimensions: horizontal, vertical, and arcuate. Typical masculine traits. From the perspective of KMP, the rhythm of muscle tone has lots of starts and stops, as well as strain and release. In the tension flow attribute to characters, it presents a very typical and intuitively high intensity and abruptness. Unipolar shape flow. These movements trait are presented in the masculine level. My overall ideal My overall ideal is to add a feminine rhythm to achieve a frequency modulation and find an intermediate state. However, during the intervention, the initial breathing did not help, and the breathing introduced the rhythm of sucking. Obviously, at that time, his instinct surge of emotion could not accept such adjustment. So I quickly adjusted the intervention, mirrored his movements, and gave empathy in movements. I used the same power as him: directness, speed, and same power. This was where we linked with each other, as if my moves were saying, I know how you feel. You feel so angry now. This same action made our relationship a little stronger. He continued to express his intrinsic emotions strongly, but the intensity gradually weakened. I know that at this time, his inner world has begun to change a little. From the feedback of the movement characteristics, he has trusted me more, which is the premise of continuing to intervene. He seemed to experience something again. He stopped, and when he pointed his finger in one direction, a new challenge came. I didn't know his story at that moment, but I believe he must be extremely painful. When he pointed his finger at the partner, I observed that his action lasted for 5 seconds, and I realized that his disassociated status at this moment could only make things worse. So I twitched his hand so it points in my own direction. At this time, the energy of emotion also points to me. My eyes and the hand were always open and gave him the message of acceptance and being seen. When he received this message, it was like a huge chemical reaction has taken place inside of him. The emotional energy transitioned from a feeling of extreme anger to extreme grievance and sadness. At that moment, his mood slowly began to cool down. Softness happened slowly. I started with my eyes and opened with my hands, using a gentle, direct, and slow drive, which was an adjusting movement element for his masculinity. With the trusting relationship, at certain moments of eye contact, the concentration of the link is getting higher and higher. The emotion can be accepted and released, and my family power can also affect him. When I finally walked into the room, I basically reached an intermediate state. The state of bound flow was loose, flowing and soft. The keen sphere was more open, and both hands could be stretched out. There was more acceptance of this space. And after the class, I made many thoughts on humanistic existentialism. About existence, it's undeniable that this man used a very intense way to make us feel his presence. The lady who confronted him also expressed her thoughts very clearly and directly. It also shows how she is. I appreciate the efforts people make to follow their hearts. I saw these efforts in both of them. Although this is extremely brave, the approach of this man has chosen has left him into trouble. It also brought fear to everyone. He used an infantile expression to express a huge frustration caused by rejection. And this rejection suddenly pushed him into an apathy at that moment. He lost control and was extremely helpless. His inner fragility was completely exposed, and to protect himself, he became fierce and turned to attack people around him. He seemed to have no choice but to choose a way like this, to call for attention and care. He originally wanted love and acceptance, but fear and anger took him in the opposite direction. He wanted to destroy everything, but this could not help him to get love. People around him will stay away from him out of fright. The lady expressed her thoughts very firmly throughout. This kind of self-awareness helps her to stabilize her strengths and keep the core of herself. And in this way, people can feel the power of hope. These two expressions bring different interpersonal pressure and effects, and they are both worthy of respect. About fear for death. The experience of destruction aroused by frustration points directly to death. This is also understandable why this man named Jack has such a fierce reaction, because for him, death is imminent, and he must fight back. This is a battle between life and death. In this fight, he wanted to struggle for the hope of surviving. His strong feeling also infected other members in the same violent way. Everyone was shocked. At that moment, almost everyone's fear of death was awakened, including mine. The challenge for me was there, and it was also the difficulty Jack encountered in life. Is there anyone in this world who can overcome this fear and accept a man who is broken like him? Probably in his life, he scared countless people away like this. This is a thrilling journey because I have also experienced the struggle and fight between life and death. Through his fear, I understood Jack, and I know that the fear in his heart tortured his soul in that way at that moment. When I crossed the battlefield, I knew that my heart, the power of courage and responsibility saved me. I am the mentor of the group, so I must protect and take care of it. This belief supported me and made me feel like being equipped with a sword, helping me to overcome fear. About loneliness. When I finally understood him where he hurts, I saw grievance in his heart, anger in his eyes, and loneliness everywhere. The fragile child finally felt noticed, saw, understood, and suddenly cried. In his life experience, there has always been a kind of despair. As soon as he gets angry, he will be abandoned. But in his life, there also exists a desire. Please don't abandon me. This call for connection has supported him until now. The most wonderful moment was when I looked at him. He looked at me, our eyes staring at each other, and we met on a very deep level. At that moment, it seemed that this world was only me and him. The feeling of this encounter is particularly beautiful. At that moment, the thing called loneliness disappeared. Although we all know that human beings will eventually face their own loneliness, this had not prevented people from finding connection and establishing a relationship with another. And my last part is about meaning. When we have experienced all these things as a group, we use language and body movements to express our inner feelings. We also started to think about the meaning of all this. Jack's reaction triggered various feelings in everyone's heart. Although it was a personal intervention for Jack, the thing we saw is for our own. A lady who participated said, "I saw Jack's pain being caught by you in this way. I feel a part of my own heart was also caught in the same way. It makes me feel more powerful and warm. In everyone's heart, there is a wish, and that is, we should all be treated well. Everything that happens in this space connects our present and past. It also has a new impact on the future. We get to know and understand ourselves through all these past pains and become more powerful in the present and more hopeful in the future. Existence itself has no meaning. It is what we go through, feel, and experience. It motivates our thinking and understanding. We are no longer just a matter itself, but people who have pain, thoughts, sorrow, and happiness. Everyone exists independently, and we need each other. We are willing to connect with each other, take risks, and bring more love and hope to this world. This is the meaning of life. Bless everyone. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Dear colleagues, I'm Grace Zhou from Beijing, China. I'd like to share with you power of DMT in helping pastoral care workers to help those in crisis, especially after the lockdown of Wuhan, in the most difficult times of coronavirus. This is what we did. We started with crisis intervention, and then after that, we go into in-depth work in helping the pastoral care workers to better discover themselves and further explore with themselves how they can transfer that into their counseling and also pastoral care help. And in the end, we do evaluation. And so at first, we did troubleshooting in the first stage. In the time of January and February, in the time of fear and confusion, we discovered that these pastoral care workers who cater to souls usually, or spirit usually, they have to deal with emotions, intense emotions at the time of when people lose will and they can't choose and their mind is totally confused. And this is the whole situation when people live in the face of death, fear, anger, grief, and confusion, anxiety. And they lost mothers and fathers, they lost their family and community support. So what do we do in troubleshooting and problem solving? In problem solving part, we first decide the physical and emotional needs. And so first of all, the security, we have to deal with security need and grief. And also at the most difficult time to support the love and protection. And also we tap on their value, the value system that they had. And so we had crisis intervention in the first 10 days, meeting with pastoral care workers online from all parts of China to deal with their own fear, anger, worthlessness, helplessness, with grounding skills, with shaking, to shake their anxiety off, with polarizations, with different DMT skills for their team. When they felt they could not help their churchgoers or they could not help in the face of death, we've helped them to ground themselves first and to build security for themselves. And in the second phase, when they went through the first month, we had in-depth work with them. We meet every Friday, 2 hours for self-discovery so that they regain their power, control, and build better relationship after the crisis in their family, in their community, and in their service field. So the self-discovery part would be authentic dance and also DMT warm-up activities. And we do also reading as well. We chose Lolo May's work, Man's Search for Meaning, just so that they can match their vision and mission, the long-term goals, with down-to-earth body and physical responses. So we had DMT skills built in, and we also will not let them forget their goals and objectives and mission, which they are familiar of. So they switch between what they familiar of, and then they go far-fetched field, which is body response. And so we do that DMT with them. And then we would do try reflections and transfer and see how we can help them to transfer DMT skills into their daily work. What's the result then? They each would complete this form, that their expectations in terms of change in attitudes, behavior, and habits. So they set their goals. They also help their churchgoers to do this so that they don't freeze where they are. And after a matter of 10 weeks, and this is what they gained from all those DMT skills and from group work, and we had individual work as well. So they do their own individual DMT video, and they would send to me, and next time we'll watch together. And so in this work, they felt, this is their feedback. Trauma healing, one of the participants said that she never understood why her shoulder pained so much. In one of the DMT sessions, she suddenly remembered her past experience before marriage. It was a traumatic experience. And then once she realized, she recalled that experience, and she could intervene for self-intervention, and her shoulders felt a lot better. pastors and pastoral care workers used to doubt a lot about DMT, especially about DMT can trigger trauma memories in the past and then bring it to healing. And so we can go from the unconscious to the conscious. They doubt a lot about that, but after that experience, this is a pastor's wife. She said she never doubted DMT, and then they engage in DMT a lot better than before. I'd like you to hear some of the feedback from them. Let's take a look. Can you pause here? I'll show the video.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'd like to share with you a case that illustrates how the humanistic approach to dance therapy has created a creative experience that has contributed to the progress of the client's healing. She is Gina, 9 years old, and she has diagnosed with ADHD in the hospital. She has been working with me for more than 2 years and has been suffering from learning disorder and emotional problems. Before the dance therapy, she had been treated with sand play therapy for about 2 years, and her emotional problems were significantly improved. However, as long as she was involved in learning tasks, she still showed strong negative emotions, and the improvement of her learning disorder did not make much progress. It even made me feel a little frustrated. Gina lives in a large family with her parents, a 3-year-old brother, and grandparents. As the therapy progressed, Gina's mom changed from being a high anxiety person to an empathetic one. She is by far the most important person in Gina's support system. Gina is very beautiful with a keen sense of aesthetics and the talents for acting and dancing. She was once punished for the poor performances at school, and all the opportunities of learning art related to her talents were cancelled. During these 2 years, we worked together to fight to keep her habits. However, due to the learning disorder and behavioral problems caused by ADHD, Gina has been scolded by the adults and bullied by peers at school and at home for a long time. Compared with her classmates, she showed more awareness of learning and rebellion. After I learned dance therapy from Ilene, I started to do dance therapy and role play with her. Gina started out with a routine that she had learned in her dancing class. But on rare occasions, she was able to move freely. Her movements were characterized by a fast, heavy, direct, biting rhythm. Later, we gradually added the move, freeze, move game, and small, large, small game, and light, heavy, light game. Gina's sense of order and control has been significantly improved, but the weariness of learning still makes learning disorder a headache. I began to do dance therapy in humanistic approach. The key point was to create a metaphorical story with the client, to express the current situation through symbolic nonverbal communication, and to create the images we aspired to. She came to my office that day. She noticed a Chinese classical hairpin I brought specially for her. She asked me to put it on her head. Then I handed her a scarf, and we began to act as the traditional Chinese beauties. Then she noticed a drum placed in the corner and began to beat it. Then we began our dance therapy with the clear rhythm that she knew well. I danced when she beat the drum, and then I beat the drum, she danced. While I was beating the drum, she ran up to me and put another hairpin on my head. She said, "Let's dance to a piece of Chinese classical music." She was a performer and a dancer, switching freely between the roles of the controller and the controlled. Her rhythm began to grow slow, soft, and indirect. Then the music of Grain of Wheat began to play. She stood in the middle of the room and began to spin. I changed from standing to squatting, playing the role of earth with a scarf, shaking it gently on the ground and looking up at her. She squatted down slowly. Then I stood up and put the scarf over her head. She began to break through the earth like a seed and began to spin again. Then she motioned me to be the seed and she to be the earth. When I began to feel like a seed out of the ground, my tears welled up in my eyes, and I was deeply moved. She squatted down with me and said, "Now we are two seeds. I am a good seed and you are a bad seed. I can germinate at the first time, but the bad seed is afraid of being trampled by others after germination. So you can't germinate at the first time. After I germinate, I will encourage you, then you can try to germinate." She began to germinate, and I knelt down and buried my face in my hands. She said, "Look at me, don't be afraid. Once you really grow out, no one will dare to tread on you. You can defeat them, and you can gain rebirth." Then, with her eyes on me, I began to grow. "I know it's very hard, but please try harder and don't be lazy. You are going to break through the earth." And she was often criticized as lazy by the adults in her real life. When the treatment was over that day, I took her downstairs. She told me a bad seed can gain rebirth if it is not lazy. After this treatment, Gina had made great progress. She studied to do her homework and finish her exams. At the beginning of this semester, she even volunteered to run for the vice monitor. There a picture of her first set play work when she came to my office at the first time, and a video of her movement recorded recently. This is the picture. And please play the video. Thank you. The humanistic approach to dance therapy, with the power of deep love and self-care rooted in the soul of the clients, make all changes possible. I'm so proud of being a DMT trainee, and I will devote myself to the practice of the humanistic approach to dance therapy in China. Ilene, thank you very much to bring me DMT to China. Thank you all.
Unmute. Thank you. While we're still recording, I said, I want to thank my beautiful students and colleagues. And I'm always so touched by their level of understanding, their deep emotional sensitivity and philosophical understanding as we kind of grapple with technology and language and interpretation. It's amazing what gets transmitted, what gets understood, and what's getting carried on in China. So my deep gratitude to all you beautiful women, and may we continue and grow and practice in China. Thank you.
Years of effort. My students want me to send their warmest regards to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Grace, my dear colleague and interpreter.